Okay, I think we should get started on this one. So good morning, good afternoon, as the case might be. This is the February edition of the series on applying analytics to real-world problems. My name is Rajesh Tyagi, and I'm the organizer for these webinars. Now, this series is an initiative of the Informs Practice session, and I hope you guys can hear me fine. And before we go to the speaker, let me just spend a minute or so on the Informs practice session. So the purpose of this section is to advance the practice of analytics, operations research, and management sciences. And as you can see, it conducts a number of activities. The top three are the annual prizes that many of you might be familiar with. We also have a couple of monthly events. We have this webinar, which is part of the monthly webinar series. And just to remind you, the schedule for the next 5 or 6 months is already put up on the website. And the next webinar will take place on March 19th. And you will have to register for it once I'm able to update the website and show the next speaker there. Let me also remind, we also have a monthly virtual networking event. This will take place next Friday, week from today, 5 p.m. in the afternoon Eastern time. And again, if you would like to attend that, please remember to go to that website and register there. And you can get to the website by going to the Informs Practice Session webpage. And if you click under events, you will see a networking event page or link to it. Anyway, this is, we hope you would like all these monthly webinars and all these happy hour events, and strongly encourage you to consider joining the Informs practice session. So let me go on to the speaker now. So for this month, our topic is optimization, it's math and psychology. And we have, for a speaker, we are pleased to have Jack Levis. He's a retired director of industrial engineering at UPS. He was responsible for the development of operational technology solutions that required advanced analytics to re-engineer processes, to streamline the business and maximize productivity. He has been the business owner and process designer for UPS's package flow technology suite of systems, which includes its award-winning delivery optimization system. He's an Informs Fellow and has received the prestigious Kimball Medal and the President's Award. And just as you see a little couple of notes on the bottom of the slide, if you have any, there is a question and answer session which will take place at the end of the webinar, and on your Zoom page, you should be able to see a button for Q&A. If you have any questions, click on that button, submit your question. At the end of his talk, Jack will read through those questions and answer them. And also to remind that we will have a networking session following this webinar from 1 to 1:30 p.m. And Jack will stay behind with us, and any follow-up questions, discussions that we would like, Jack would be able to answer those questions as well. So without any further delay, let me invite Jack to start his presentation. Jack?
Okay, let me.
I'm gonna start my screen.
Okay, hopefully, do you see my screen now? Right,
yes, I do.
Very good. Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk to everybody. After being retired, I feel a little distant. It said I was an independent advisor, but I'm really just grandpa. That's where I spend my time, advising my grandkids. I do want to talk about this subject because I think there's much more than just providing tools in math into truly making an impact. I might sound a little grumpy sometimes. That may show through on a couple of slides, maybe even starting with this one. I never liked people saying, hey, we need to be innovative. I never liked just pushing that, and people who had titles, Chief Innovation Officer. Something just always felt wrong. So let's look at what two founders have to say about innovation. One is the founder of UPS on the left, and then of course, Ben Franklin on the right. Jim Casey, who founded UPS, said that inspiration and enthusiasm are of little value unless they bring us to action and accomplishment. I don't think innovation is getting in a room brainstorming and coming up with the next great idea. I think it's the execution of the idea along with the idea. I care about execution. Ben Franklin said it more plainly. He just said, well done is better than well said. And you never know what you'll find in a fortune cookie. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. The tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Everything says that innovation is the combination of the idea, but more importantly, the execution of the idea. I don't know if Ranga Nugahali is on here. He used to be the president of the practice section, but I love Ranga because Ranga was my chief scientist and Ranga knew how to execute. Ranga knew how to get things done, even if they weren't the most elegant. Here's my belief on what the future is of supply chain, and really this is the future of business. It's data, which is high quality data, not yesterday's backward looking data, but high quality data. Frontline technology to let you look at the data, interact with it, cleanse it, make decisions from the data. And then of course you need advanced analytics on top of that suite of tools. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story is that we need leadership as well as change management. That's where psychology comes in. The top part is the tools and the math, but the leadership and change management is what really makes this work. And I've seen this. It was mentioned UPS won the 2016 Informs Prize for our combination of data, analytics, tools, but also the change management. Sometimes I'll play this video of us receiving the award from past Informs president, Ann Robinson, but I'm not going to do that today for in need of time. So let's move on to focus, and you can call this psychology, but little things are important. I always looked at the little things, focus on things that aren't necessarily the largest. For me, it could have been as small as 1 minute or 1 mile. If we could reduce just 1 mile a day at UPS, that would be worth about $50 million at the end of the year in cost savings. Seconds add up to minutes and minutes add up to millions. A reduction of 1 minute of driver time is worth about 14.5 miles, $1 million a year. And even reducing idle time, shutting off a vehicle appropriately, 1 minute of idle time per driver could save $500,000 in fuel alone. My point is the psychology of find little things. You don't have to find the big giant home run, but little things done over and over again can make a huge impact. It's about focus. This is a bad word for me. I never wanted to hear this. And this isn't operations research, and it's not operating ratio, it's OR. I never wanted somebody to come to me and say, do you want sustainability or higher profits? Do you want better performance or better service? The answer is yes. OR needs to turn into and. And my belief, and it's been shown from my experience, that frontline technology, data, and advanced analytics can turn OR into and I'd like to show that to you today. We've all talked about analytics, and I don't need to go into this a lot, but Informs has its definition of analytics, the scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. What that means is data has to turn into insight, and insight has to turn into action. What that means is if you have data that doesn't turn into insight, that's entertainment. If you have insight that doesn't turn into action, that's just trivia. And it's nice to talk about, but it didn't make a better decision. We need to turn data into action. That's what's important. Another piece of what can get grumpy for me is buzzwords. And pick your favorite buzzword. Big data, AI is the one today, there was IoT, you name it. But everybody threw the buzzword out there, but you need to think of that buzzword like the dog who's chasing the car. What are you going to do with it once you catch it? It's about the impact, it's not about the tool. Things like big data are important, things like AI are important, but those are all whats, I mean hows. The what is the better decision, and our psychology needs to be about focusing on the better decision, not the tools. I think if we focus on the decision and work backwards, then we could say, what information do I need to make a better decision? What tools do I need to provide that information? And what data do I need to feed the tools? I think by working backwards, what's needed becomes much more apparent. You probably have seen this chart before, and it's the hierarchy of analytics from descriptive to diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. And I don't need to go through all of those, but the key is, as you move through this hierarchy, from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive analytics or optimization sits, your business benefits will grow, the data you need will increase, the skill set of your people will grow, the impact to the business becomes greater. And that means that you can't have your vision end at describing or even predicting. Your vision has to move all the way into optimization and prescription. And that's what I've seen. In 2003, we deployed this suite of predictive models and descriptive tools called Package Flow Technologies. And that reduced about 85 million miles driven a year. On top of that, we then deployed Orion, which is our prescriptive models, our optimization, and reduced an additional $100 million miles a year. Overall, the savings was greater than $500 million annually, but our vision never ended at predicting. We knew we had to move into optimization, and I'm hoping to take you through that journey a little bit today. Let's talk a little about high quality data, and it really needs to be built into a process. This is UPS's process for data gathering. It's the tools that are used. And when we did it, we wanted to make sure we were always gathering the right data, that it was built within the process to gather data. If you scan a package, where is a driver when that's happening? If you meet a customer, if you get a signature when you leave that location, we were always gathering the data so we could feed it to corporate repositories, so we could use it for description and prediction. That was important. There were other forms of data, and in this case, it's telematics. We put data gathering devices on the vehicle that could tell us where is the driver at any point in time. The handheld told us where the driver was. This GPS unit told us where the vehicle was. If the driver opened the door behind them, we knew that door was open. If the vehicle stopped, if it was in reverse, if the engine was on or off. This gave us a complete picture of what a driver was doing, and then we could use that data for further analysis. By combining the data from the handheld, the maps, the other corporate repositories, the engine itself, all the PIDs it's throwing, we had a good way to analyze yesterday that really gave us a good set of tools for description, but also we would use it for prediction. The thing about descriptive analytics, with all this data, it's easy to see. It's easy to make an impact, but you're really only going to gain the low-hanging fruit. We could see where seat belts were on and off. We could see if engine was on and off, or driver was backing their vehicle. We could certainly look for route inefficiencies where drivers might have overlapped each other or took an inefficient route. But the problem with descriptive analytics is that unless tomorrow is like yesterday, it's hard to affect change. You could see the inefficiencies of what's already happened, but how do you move that to tomorrow and truly make change? That's where the rest of package flow came in. That's where we needed to build some online frontline tools to help users make better decisions and predict. And the tools were varied. There were a suite of tools. We needed to forecast and plan tomorrow. We needed to monitor as that plan was executing and then adjust if things didn't go exactly towards plan. You know, data is not perfect. So when things went awry, we needed to make that adjustment. We needed to communicate while we were executing with drivers so that they knew what to do. And then we needed to support. Supervisors needed mobility. And then, of course, after the fact, analyzation again. This really followed the Shukert cycle with frontline tools: plan, do, check, and then act. That's the key. The suite of tools allow you to interact with that rich data. There's another piece of the puzzle when you're building these predictive tools and operations, especially, you need to be looking forward. And there's a little issue that you come up with. You know, everybody talks about digital twins, but often that discussion on digital twins is yesterday. It's a twin of what's already happened that matches the real world. Think about it. If you want to plan tomorrow, then there's multiple digital twins. One that says, what if there's snow? One that says, what if drivers aren't here? You know, there's many versions of tomorrow you have to pick. And that means that there needs to be a way to communicate from that virtual world to the physical world to tell people what to do. That's an important piece of the puzzle. Now, what we did was something really simple: a label. This label tells whoever touches a package, and it's placed on there just before a package is loaded in a vehicle to go for delivery, tells everybody who touches that package what is supposed to happen with it. In this case, at this point in time, this package goes on Route 120, position 1118. If you ever get a delivery from UPS, look for this label. This is what decided where that package goes and where your delivery fit within the delivery cycle. Another way to communicate between the virtual and the physical is with a driver's handheld computer. We would show a driver everything they needed to do for the day, the address they needed to be at, what time they needed to be at that address, how many packages they had to deliver. Everything was there for that driver, so that they weren't really always acquiring data with their handheld. That handheld now became an assistant to help them make better decisions. Now, let's go back to data again. We looked at using the driver's handheld so they could make better decisions, but gather other data to ensure that they didn't make mistakes. In this example, if you requested a signature, the handheld knew that, would tell the driver you need a signature, but wouldn't let the driver leave unless the signature that was promised was attained. Well, then we went ahead and indexed other pieces of data into the suite of tools, something we called notes. We took all the information that drivers had in their heads and their little notepads, and we put it into a computer database, and that was linked. So every time a delivery would happen, we could tell a driver what you're supposed to do. In this case, park at the dock, deliver to the mail room. The bottom one there's a little interesting. It says no indirect, no reroute, no left at. For this customer, for this day, the customer says, if I'm not home, don't give the package to a neighbor, come back tomorrow. Another customer may say, if I'm not home, put it on the back porch or give it to a neighbor, etc., or take it to an access point. The system is smart enough to know the difference, and again, will not let the driver make that mistake. Now, the key here is your driver already knew this. They're professionals. But what about when that driver's on vacation? Or at Christmas time when volume doubles and somebody else is running the route? Now cost can be efficient and service can be the same regardless of who is running the route. When you put all these things together, what do you end up with? Agility, efficiency, and customer service all at the same time. It's not one in conflict with another, it's all together. And in these days of e-commerce and COVID, This is what allowed UPS to be so efficient during these times. Here's another thing you can do with these suite of tools, and that's make real-time decisions that are cost-based. There's a little known product that UPS has, and it's called SurePost. Package is picked up by UPS, transferred through the system by UPS, tractor, trailer, or air, doesn't matter. And then at the final mile, UPS drops it off at the post office, and the post office will make the delivery. It's a low cost, no frills service, and it takes an extra day or two to get it to the customer. It's a response to e-commerce of customers wanting lower cost shipping. Well, think what's in this data model that we have. We know where the UPS location, USPS location is, but we also know where the final mile delivery is. So in this case, the driver would drop the parcel off at the USPS location, but we do know where that final delivery point is. What if our analytics said that UPS can deliver this package cheaper than it cost UPS to deliver it, to have to pay the post office for delivery? Well, in that case, the tools would find this out in real time. It would create that special label, this time it's black on white, to say UPS is redirecting this package. We would tell people, put it in the vehicle normally for a UPS driver to deliver, and we'll tell the driver in their handheld. This suite of tools in real time, making optimization decisions, ended up worth about, I don't know, $1 million a week in reduced cost and higher efficiency, maintaining or improving that service to a customer. Other things you can do with this digitization. Tracking is 1990s technology. Telling you where your package is a who cares nowadays. We have the opportunity every time a package is touched by a device, a scanner, driver's handheld, even that label, to connect with the customer, because those devices are connected to the cloud, but so are the customers. So why not let customers utilize the exact same tools that UPS's planners use? So take a look at this suite of tools called My Choice. A customer can get a delivery alert and a delivery planner. Guess what? It's the exact same forecast that the UPS planners get in order to make their plans for tomorrow. If they want to reschedule a delivery or hold it, or even say they don't need a signature, they can do that by flipping a bit, which is the exact same bit that the planner at UPS would have flipped, and that will move exactly to the driver in their handheld by merging this virtual and physical together. The digitization, the frontline tools, the data, and the advanced analytics allow you to make additional products for our customers. So what is the impact up through package flow, which would have been those predictive models? What was the impact to UPS? Well, the reduction of about 85 million miles driven a year. If you look at the bottom, there's a little formula there. That says if you take energy and add information to it, you need less energy. That was a reduction of 8 million gallons fuel a year, 85,000 metric tons of CO2 not going into the atmosphere. Because everything was data-driven, loader can get trained in 95% less time, service levels are the highest ever, and new products. This is certainly and not or. And everything I just told you is a fairy tale. And this is where psychology comes in. I don't mean the benefits aren't real. I don't mean the systems aren't real. If anything, I understated what the gains were, and I understated the impact. But you don't find a glass slipper, put it on the princess's foot, and live happily ever after. That's not how the real world works. There's a lot of sweat, a lot of tears, a lot of psychology that goes into this math to make it effective. So let me tell you the other side of the story that was not in the headlines. About 2003, we started deploying that suite of package flow technologies that saved 85 million miles a year. It was fanfare. There were satellite interviews, there were conferences, press conferences. I went to PR school to learn how to talk to the press, and it was great. in there, we were doing something amazing. The headlines were there, and our CEO told our investors we're going to save 100 million miles a year, and that would be worth a lot of money. What we didn't think about was how difficult that was going to be. And, you know, people always want to know about management support. Well, we had management support all the way from the top. This is UPS's CEO at the time, and he got it. He called this being a one-to-one business. He wanted to move everything into data and treat every customer as if they were the only one we had. And he knew we couldn't do that unless we knew where every package was every moment, a data-driven business. Why don't you listen to him and see the type of management support we had?
And as revolutionary as the shift from the paper clipboards to the Diad, we've already put the system in 8 centers, and we'll be in about 80 more by the end of the year, with full deployment over the next couple of years. By streamlining route planning and preload processing, we will save time, reduce costs, increase productivity, improve service, and provide an infrastructure to add new products, all of which will create significant competitive advantage for UPS.
What more could you ask for, really? You know, I was the program manager. Mike gave me that role. I couldn't have asked for more, but there's more needed other than the support from the top. Deming talks about that just top line support isn't enough. You need more. You need more organizational support, and that's what I learned. 1 year later, by the way, this was the headline. New package flow technology not delivering for UPS. We had 1/3 of our sites get better. 1/3 of our sites stayed the same, and believe it or not, 1/3 of our sites actually got worse. UPS had some excuses at that point in time, but the press and the investors who were promised a return were not very happy with us. These were dark, dark days when a great tool wasn't being used. I felt like I was on the witness protection program for package flow. We could not mention that in the press. Not until really a few years ago was it allowed to mention to the press, because our investors had such a bad feeling about the promise that wasn't executed. Remember, innovation, is it the idea or is it the execution of the idea? It's the execution that's innovative. What I learned is if you build it, don't assume they're going to come. The tools and the math are not enough. You need more. We built this awesome race car that was great technology, but people didn't yet know how to drive it. We didn't understand the concept of change management. It wasn't, even though it seemed obvious, it was much harder to do than it seemed. Moving to a data-driven enterprise takes much more than just gathering yesterday's data and using it. It's a change in a mindset. Prior to this, you could say, before a driver leaves the building, hey, you two folks move some packages between you because this driver wants to go home early or something came up differently. You can't do that anymore when you're data-driven, because every change needs to be in the system. I remember saying back then that people thought was a joke. Remember, this is 20 years ago. I would say the data is as important as the package. And you know what? That turned out to be the case. We didn't stop, by the way, and I find this funny. In 2013, Information Week called Package Flow Technologies, that suite of tools that failed, they called this the greatest idea to steal in 2013. They talked about the 85 million miles we saved annually. It took a decade for the world to understand that we were ahead. It didn't take us a full decade to get the gains. We never stopped trying, but it took a while for that change to happen and the world to understand that these changes were real. It took a decade to go from being a hero to a goat and then back to a hero again. In this period of time, we were convinced we were going to learn from our mistakes. We were not going to make the same mistakes of putting something out that didn't have change management built in, didn't understand the psychology. And as we were having issues with package flow, we took a bold step and started building an optimization system that could sit on top of this infrastructure that we built. Remember, package flow had the data model, and the planning tools and analysis tools, but we wanted to put on top of that the prescriptive tools, more real-time analysis, the advanced algorithms, and we knew we now had to bring in even higher quality data. So we took that bold step, but we were going to learn from the past. What Orion does is simple. It's going to optimize the driver's route, taking into account all the service commitments, the customer needs and business rules. The decisions are cost-based, and if you look on the right, really from a driver's perspective, they would say it just sorted the list. They had a general flow on how to deliver. Now they had a specific flow on what to do first, second, third. Well, there's a reality check here too, by the way. I know that you who know much more than I do are thinking about this and saying, well, that's just a TSPTW or a TSP. Well, guess what? It's not. And let me prove to you why. I call this, are you smarter than a fifth grader? Because this is something we learned from a fifth grader. The person that I made the project manager on Orion decided that he was going to go to his daughter's fifth grade class and teach them what a TSP was and a TSPTW is. And here are the slides he used, by the way. He said, you have 6 things you need to do. I want you to find the shortest path through all these points. And all he did is give them a time and distance matrix, and they had to do this mathematically. He explained to this fifth grade class, there's 720 possible ways to go through these 6 points, and they did. And they came up with a traveling salesman problem to solve this. And that's crazy enough that he took this on and they did it, but Bob always goes to the next step. So Bob said, well, there's more. I want to teach you that there's something called a TSPTW, traveling salesman problem with time windows. He explained that there's still 720 combinations, but not all of them are feasible. With some of them, you won't get to the locations when they're open, and he gave them the windows where you had to be there when those locations were open. And again, to my amazement, they came up with another way to do this, and Bob was proud of himself until a little girl in the front row said, Mr. Santilli, this is just stupid. And I don't know if you caught it. She said, my mother would never go to the grocery store in the morning and have the ice cream sitting in the car all day melting. That's the real world. And think about it. It sounds simple, but how do you solve this problem? What are the rules for the grocery store? Is it always the last stop before you get home? Well, maybe, but what if there's another stop directly on the way home from the grocery store? Do I have to go backtrack to the grocery store and there? Well, maybe it's within 30 minutes from getting home is the rule for the grocery store. But what if it's cold out? Maybe 30 minutes is longer. And what if it's warmer out? And what if I don't have any perishables? And if that's the case, how am I going to get that data? My point is, something as simple as running errands on a weekend is much more complicated to come up with implementable solutions, not optimal, not feasible, but truly implementable. It's much harder to do than it seemed. And we spent a lot of time researching, figuring out how to come up with a suite of tools that could think like a driver. What we learned is we needed to balance consistency and optimality. Drivers and customers want to do things the same. So we had to figure out, how do you violate consistency where it makes sense? And I'll pay an extra $1 to be more consistent. What is that balance? We also needed to shift how we thought. We had rules on how to analyze yesterday, and we tried to use yesterday's rules and yesterday's data to optimize tomorrow. That didn't work. We had to rethink the entire delivery process. We had to come up with ways to make the system think like a driver. On the left, that's a very simple TSP running through an area. But you can't just crisscross across a relatively busy street. We had to come up with some ways to go down appropriately when it made sense, one side of the street, and back up the other, because that makes more sense for a driver. Even with this example on the left, if you have to go down a cul-de-sac and come back, it doesn't matter the sequence you deliver those stops. It's the same number of miles regardless, but that's only objective. Subjectively, drivers think it's stupid to have that order jumbled. We had to think through things like that so our tools thought like a driver. We did this by living with drivers, and something came up that surprised me. As we were working through the algorithms, getting feedback from the drivers, they wanted to know why the system thought like it did. In essence, they wanted the tool not to be a black box, but a glass box. And we built them a little kiosk so they could interact with the solution, so that they could see why it made decisions that were counterintuitive. And I'll show you that in a second. You know, some of these things are hard to see. It's hard to see the difference between one solution and another. And this came up when David Pogue, who was the host of a Nova show, came out and wanted to see if he could beat Orion. Let me show you two examples of a route. I've done this with thousands of people, and about half the people will say the one on the left has fewer miles, about half will say the one on the right has fewer miles. The one on the left is David Pogue, the one on the right is Orion, and you can't see the difference between those two. But guess what? There's 10 miles difference from one to another. Changes are subtle. It's a little bit across many things. If it was easy to see, we didn't need the optimization. We needed the optimization to find the subtle differences. And that's $500 million. 10 miles times $50 million a mile is $500 million, and people can't even see it. This gets us to leadership and change that's not easy. You know, one of the questions that I'm asked the most often is, how did you sell upper management on Orion? And the truth is, it's not a pet rock. You don't get in a room, make a presentation, and people go, good, I'll buy it. You know, nobody wants to be sold to, but everybody wants to buy. So I presented them information that said, I want to buy this. I want it from you. So let me show you what I presented them. We ran some tests and prototypes. We proved by using it in some controlled cases how Orion performed in the real life. Now, this line you see here is all the sites that don't have Orion that are similar to the site we're deploying. Think of it like a control group. This is a performance metric. It's stops per mile, I think, one of the largest performance metrics. Here's the site that we are going to deploy to. And you'll notice it follows very similarly to the control group up until deployment, which is that vertical line. The red line on the bottom, by the way, is the percent of drivers deployed. So no drivers are deployed yet. Watch what happens to performance after drivers deploy. The change is dramatic. This site separates from everybody else, and it's commensurate with the number of drivers being deployed. I measured the gap in performance and told the C-suite, this is now my estimate of the gains that we're going to get and the impact that we will have on the bottom line. They wanted to buy, and I was directed to run 11 more tests to make sure that we didn't have the same mistake with package flow. I went ahead and measured, could I transfer the knowledge to people that aren't engineers? How am I going to train? What's the usability? What are the procedures? And also, what are the metrics? We wanted to make sure that when we deployed, we were going to get a good result. Again, it's not the idea or the tool, it's the execution of the tool, it's math and psychology. Well, the day came for launch, and there was no going back. We were going to start deploying this tool that was going to be a game changer. I had one algorithm, 1,200 locations to get to, 60,000 drivers, and we were going to do it a driver at a time. So 2012 came and we started getting ready for deployment. And it's no longer a corporate thing. It's done by deployment teams. The green lines you see here are the estimated benefits or the improvements that we expected to get. And as we started deploying, once again, just like the other charts that I had shown, we are beating the gains that we expected. We're seeing that dramatic change, just like we thought. But while this was going on, something was in my mind, and that was we had never done this for the long haul. We always did a test for a short period of time. There were people on site. They would leave and the tool would leave. Now we had to see how these sites did when the deployment team left and went on to their next site, and watch what happened. It was scary. Now for you, these are 3 dots on a chart. For me, this is 12 weeks of my life I'm not getting back, not knowing when that free fall was going to stop. The change hadn't taken hold. We knew we had a good tool, we knew we had good procedures, but the change in the field had not taken hold. We needed to go back. We needed to keep working on education and communication. We always had support from the top. We had to train people, but more importantly, we needed new metrics. What I learned is if you don't change the conversation, you become a flavor of the month. You need to have people talk about something different in the morning than they used to. And we did something really simple. And this is one of the largest things we did. We came up with a balanced scorecard. There was just a simple red, yellow, and green down to an individual. We hit it here, but down to an individual person, we knew how they were doing with the system. And these metrics were not how many dollars did you save. They were things within their control. Are you maintaining your data? Is your plan of high quality? Are you overriding the system? And are you following the solution? And the concept was, if we could just do these leading indicators that were in their control, then the lagging indicators that the C-suite cares about of dollars saved had to follow. This is how the conversation changed because these were a priority. We ended the year in decent shape. By the way, that last dot is Christmas time. We didn't even know if it was going to work at Christmas time, but we ended right about where we told the C-suite and the board of directors where we would be. And this is where we ended up throughout. Same chart, but just extended. The red lines are the estimated benefit, the gains we told the C-suite. The dots are where we were at any point in time. And you could see we raised the estimated benefit twice. And every time we did, the field did better than we expected. And by the way, something happened that I didn't expect at all. Sites did better in their second year than they did in their first, in their third year than they did in their second. They continued to get better as they learned to use the suite of tools, as they learned to come up with new ways to interact with the algorithms that we didn't expect. This suite of tools ended up saving $300 to $400 million a year, and that's conservative. Again, 10 million gallons worth of fuel not driven or not purchased, 100,000 metric tons of CO2 not going into the atmosphere. Again, it's not the idea, it's the execution of the idea. If I took this journey and broke it into 3 pieces, there was the OR and analytics, the algorithms we had to create. There was the IT systems that had to be built, and then deployment. And even though, remember, it took 5 years to build that algorithm, and then we built the IT systems on top of it, here's my estimation of where my personal effort was. About 2/3 of my effort was in deployment, making sure it was being used every day, monitoring on how sites were doing. Every single week following up, are we deploying? That's what made this successful. You know, this is Arthur Schopenhauer. He said that truth passes through 3 stages. It's ridiculed, then violent opposition, and then accepted as if self-evident. You know, when we started, people laughed and said an algorithm can never tell a professional driver a better way to deliver. When we didn't stop and people would dig their feet in and saying, they're going to fight the change, I'm not going to do this. At the end, they look backwards and go, Of course, we were always going to optimize. This was apparent. This was always the right thing to do. If you ever get a chance, I actually did a TED talk on this subject of getting through from ridicule to violent opposition to acceptance as self-evident. I want to play one more video for you. What I want you to listen to, these are people that use the tool. I want you to listen to how they own this tool. It's not corporate telling them what they need to do. It's them owning the suite of tools. That's what makes me proud when I listen to this.
This was drastic for us. It changed the way we load the trucks. It changed the way we plan for the driver to deliver. It changes the way the driver delivers the route.
Orion has taken a situation that was good before and made it even better.
It'll show us our entire day from beginning to end.
It has shown me possibilities that I would have never thought were possible.
We used to get excited about a 1% gain in stops per mile. And to see some of the daily operation results now over 10% easily and even higher, it's really been incredible.
It tells you exactly how to drive to your first stop and then also how you get back to the building from your last stop. So it allows me to focus on my safety aspects, lifting and lowering properly, and then also with my customers, addressing them properly, seeing how they're doing, and just being a professional.
From my perspective, it allows me to put more work on the cars, to make sure the driver doesn't have too little work and to make sure the driver doesn't have too much work. Orion allows me to put like that right amount of work on.
It's also been impressive to use the technology for peak season.
The amount of work that UPS sees is essentially doubled. With this tablet, I'm able to pretty much pull any route that we have in a building without having any prior knowledge of said route.
Being sent myself to an area that I'm unfamiliar with and using the tablet and the technology and being successful takes just a few challenges out of the mix for us from the many challenges that we have at peak.
Let's say if I'm on the road for a 9.2-hour day, and a year ago I did 110 stops, now I can do 115, 118 in the same amount of time.
Our carbon footprint, the miles that we save, the time that we're paying a driver to deliver boxes, wear and tear on the vehicle, on the road systems, oil changes, all of the above. I mean, it impacts everything we do.
And you can see I'm pretty proud of what we've done. I'm sure that shows. Let's close with just some quick best practices. A leader should focus on decisions and work backwards. I think someone running an analytics department should know the different type of analytics and what each can do, but what they cannot do. Organizations need to invest in data, but also understand the limitations of that data. I've never been on a project where data was enough. Analytics needs to be in the process. A driver doesn't know that they're using these advanced tools. They're just doing their job. It just fits. Don't wait for the perfect system. We deployed a version of the tool that wasn't perfect, and then we enhanced it as we went about. Change management, I can never say enough about that, and conversations need to change. And then do what you're doing today. Learn from others and network. As you know, Informs is, of course, a great way to learn from others. Most importantly, above all, it's the team. This is just a small part of the team that we had on Orion. You can see Ranga there in the front. The team is the most important part of this. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jack. We have one question there, and perhaps if you can look at the Q&A box, and perhaps if you can read the question and then answer that.
Let me, I got to get the Q&A box up. Can you read it to me while I'm trying to find
absolutely. It? Okay. So the question is from Yazid Mahi. Is the hidden Markov model commonly used in predictive analytics? If so, how?
I don't know. I don't know. I got to be honest. I never focused on the model. I focused on the result. I can't do what you do. By the way, I managed a large advanced analytics team. Among other things, that was probably a small part of my job. I was the business owner of all of these tools. So I was the one who was responsible for the gains. I just happened to have 3 analytics divisions. So I never worried so much about that individual tool. I really don't know. If somebody's on, if Ranga Nugahali's on, he could probably tell you, but I honestly don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And by the way, even though I was been an industrial engineer for 35 years and managed the operations research group for 20, my education is psychology, not engineering or math. And if there's more, you're going to have to read it. I can't see.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that. Next question is from Kansu Agrali. I might have missed it. Could you please share the difference between Ryan and Orion again?
Orion is the name of the suite. ORION. So that might have been me speaking quickly. That stands for on-road, integrated optimization and navigation. So they all go together. The, I didn't have time for this, but UPS built its own custom map data that's higher quality data than you will see anywhere. We needed that to feed Orion. So what we learned is Orion knew what was inside the map, but if drivers didn't know how to get to the stop, they would have issues. So we actually had to build a navigation system for the drivers as well. That's why it's navigation at the end of it.
Okay. Another question, any insight on getting union cooperation?
Oh, great question. Great question. UPS is a union company, the largest employer of Teamsters in the world. And that means you have to get union approval for things we do. Let's put it that way. Or not so much approval, but union transparency when we're doing things. So we just talk to the union and employees all the time. It really never became an issue. We made sure that the system followed all union rules. So for instance, make sure that the employee is going to get their allocated lunch, make sure that we never ask an employee to speed. We made sure all of those things were in place within the tools. What we've learned is it becomes transparency with the union, and the working relationship was very, very good. There was one strike in UPS's history. It was very painful. It was 1997. And since then, we really haven't had any issues. So, but you do need to get the unions involved. And as I said, we lived with the drivers. We lived with them. We were in there every day getting their feedback. We did something like, it was a funny story, but many drivers would say a computer can't do better than me. And what we would do is when a driver would do better than Orion, we would try to figure out what they did, and then we'd incorporate that in the algorithm. Something that we did, one of my staff did that was really good. Drivers hated it when we would go, here is your plan for today. And we would say, this is what you need to do. That was insulting to them. So what we did is we put a little sheet of paper in the office, and it would just say, beat the computer. So they would say, this is what Orion is. And then their job was to do better than Orion. And that little change got us a lot of buy-in.
Okay. And before I move on to the next question, again, I know some people might drop out because it's getting a little bit close to one. So again, I just want to thank you first and also remind the audience that we do have a happy hour next Friday at 5 p.m. And the next version of this webinar would be next month. I forget the date right now, but I had posted it earlier. But we'll continue with these questions. Jack is going to stick around for another half an hour or so. So again, thank you to those who have to leave, and we hope to see you again. Jack, so the previous question about the union was from John Milne. Next question is from Anna Nagurny. Thank you for a truly inspiring, very inspirational presentation. You set new standards. I was wondering whether you can speak a bit on the important role of UPS in the vaccine rollout and perhaps challenges.
Well, first of all, Anna, I'm a huge fan of yours. I'm honored that you're here and asking the question. I retired a year and a half ago, so I can only tell you about the challenges based on my conversations with friends. But here's what I can tell you. UPS has been working on supply chain, cold chain, turning on a dime for many, many years. That infrastructure that was put in place to handle things is what UPS used to handle COVID. So let me not only talk about the vaccine, because that's using certainly our airplanes and our people and the cold storage and the warehouses. I know UPS put a priority on that, but let me Anna, turn it a little differently. Prior to e-commerce, things were pretty consistent in the business. You knew pretty much that year to year there was going to be a 2% change, and you knew the cycles of when the peaks and valleys were going to be, and you could predict Christmas time pretty easily. But then came e-commerce, and that prediction was much harder to make. It was hard to say what was going to happen based on last year. And then came COVID, and the variability was even greater. What I've read in the papers and what I've seen talking to colleagues, this infrastructure that was put in place to digitize, optimize front-end tools, all of that, allowed UPS to be effective through e-commerce, but also allowed UPS to be effective through COVID, when yesterday's rules keep changing. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but being able to turn on a dime was important. Our concept was always, if we could build this infrastructure, then we could be very agile, regardless of who was running a route. It could be very objective. And that turned out to save the company, I think, during e-commerce and COVID. And I'm still a UPS share owner. And I'm pretty pleased with what's happened to the share price in that period of time.
Okay. Next question is from Bill Klimek. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. Hi, Jack. You mentioned that there were improvements in subsequent years after deployment. Were those helped from deployment teams or all locally generated?
Another person I'm a fan of. Hi, Bill. I love chatting with you. Another great question. There was an algorithm change that in that period of time that should have improved things, but that one should have improved everybody at the same time. So some of the improvement we saw was a change we made in the algorithm. The thing that I didn't expect was the improvement in the site that was purely from their learning to use the tool themselves. And let me give you an example. Everything obviously is dependent on what time a driver leaves the building, right? Well, sites started figuring out that they could use Orion and say, rather than I'll tell you what time the driver is going to leave, let me try different times. What if a driver leaves at 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock? And as it turns out, there is a difference in what time a driver leaves and performance. It's kind of like a bathtub, actually. If you leave too early, your costs go up. And if you leave too late, your costs go up. So they started figuring out ways to make additional changes, just using the algorithm to get additional insight. And that's what happened. They figured out how to work with drivers that weren't doing as well. So, you know, maybe the first year, 8 out of 10 drivers were doing great, and 2, they had to do some tweaking. Well, over a time, they would start tweaking the other 2. And I was just shocked when I watched an individual site year by year by year, their performance improved. It was just surprising to me.
Okay. Next question is from Srinivas Bola-Pragada. Hi, Jack. Thanks for the excellent presentation. How did you address the flexibility issue that you had mentioned? Can a driver now transfer his packages to another driver if he wants to go home a couple of hours early?
Wow, again, another person. I guess everybody I'm going to say that I'm a huge fan of. Hi, Srinivas. I know it didn't come clear and I didn't have time to present it, but there's control systems inside there. So if a driver, if you had 2 drivers and the day is moving on, and one driver looks like they're going to be done later than another, you can electronically transfer packages from one driver to another. And that's the most expensive way to do it. You're likely going to transfer pickups. You're likely going to say, rather than you going to Walmart or something to pick up a package, somebody else will. And you can do that electronically and move it. If drivers realized they needed to transfer packages, they could just scan it and the 2 devices move them. So you always have to keep everything in sync, and there's countless ways to make sure they're in sync. You really don't want drivers to be transferring on their own. You want that to come up through corporate, through the control group site. That's what happens. We allow drivers to do it on their own and then, you know, look at it yesterday. That doesn't happen as often, but there's actually a control piece that monitors all day long and then moves work to keep drivers efficient.
Okay. Next question from Amro L. Adel. What role do you see for automated deliveries in the future?
You know, I think everybody wants automated vehicles, and it's going to happen at some point. And UPS is doing some drone deliveries now. You know, it's, you know, healthcare things, small. Honestly, I think it's a while away. I think drones will be doing deliveries before you'll see drivers do that. With drivers, that's just what I see. You know, as long as the driver's still there, you're paying the cost of everything else. So I think that's further away, my opinion, than people think. I think you'll see some more drone deliveries for urgent goods. You know, one thing that was being looked at when I was there was automating what's inside the vehicle. You know, a driver goes to a delivery, has to open the door behind them, find the package, grab it, make the delivery and back. Well, if you can save time for the driver finding that package within the vehicle, there's a lot to save. Watch a delivery to your house. Watch what happens from the time a driver parks till they get out of the vehicle to your house and back. If you can shorten that amount of time, you can give the driver more delivery. So I think that's something that will happen sooner, to see if we can improve that amount of time. You know,
next question. I know you just mentioned drones, but perhaps you can expand on that. The question is, how do you anticipate drones being used in package delivery?
So, boy, I wish I had time for a video. I actually have a video on this. So put it into multiple perspectives. You have the, you need to get some medicine to somebody. Well, a drone can get it there quickly, and think of that as a service that you're going to provide. And UPS, by the way, is doing that now. As I was leaving, UPS had started doing that, you know, a year and a half ago. I think it's called Flight Forward, I think is the name of it. But that actually happens today. And that's going to be from a fixed point delivery, get it there quickly and back. There's other places where I think you can see that from a service standpoint. Watch a driver who's got to get on a ferry, go across, the Sound or something. Well, you can have drones deliver that and be the first down on the street. And I think that could be, again, from a fixed point over. A cost saving area for delivery is take a driver in a rural area who has to go maybe 5 miles away to make a delivery and then 5 miles back. Well, that's a 10-mile round trip, which is an expensive proposition. So in this case, it's a coordinated delivery. A drone inside the vehicle takes off. The driver's making one stop, the drone makes another. And I actually have a video of this. You could probably find it online, and then meets up with the driver. There is an OR problem in this case. It's not helpful for a drone to make a delivery to your house and a driver show up at your neighbor's house later. So which of the deliveries are the ones that are droneable, that make sense? Where should that drone take off? Where should the driver wait? You don't want the driver waiting 10 minutes for the delivery. So back, the driver catches, you'll see the drone land on the vehicle, come down inside the vehicle and charge itself. And if we had time, I'd play you a video where you could actually see it. It's probably online on YouTube somewhere, but that'll be a cost saving use for drones.
Maybe if you can send a link to that video later on, I can include it when this one is posted, this presentation. Next question from Praveen Singh. I'm a ship captain and an international graduate student. I'm curious to know, how would UPS utilize Orion to optimize a shipment carried via ocean-going vessel in a multimodal shipment transport?
Well, that's different than Orion, because Orion will work in final mile. And this happened a lot at UPS too. People talked about Orion for things that aren't Orion. A different suite of tools UPS is working on, or probably is finishing up as we speak. If you took UPS and broke it into 3 or 4 pieces, there's final mile, and that's Orion. There's what happens on property, sorting a package, loading a package, washing vehicles. There's a suite of tools called Edge that has its own little infrastructure like package flow, and its own suite of tools, optimizations that sit on top of that. So that would be on property work. And then you have the network itself. How do goods get from origin to destination? Do they fly? Do they drive? Do they go ocean? That's more of a network model. Where should buildings be, their size? That's something called Network Planner's Toolkit that also has a suite of tools. And they're all the same in that they all require high quality data. They all require frontline technology to interact with the data. They all require advanced analytics or optimizations. So there's a suite of tools that can actually help decide how goods move through the network. By the way, the fourth leg, which I spent little time on, is the airline itself. There's some tools there, but if you looked at all 4 of those, each one of them has their own set of infrastructure and their own set of optimizations. And deciding how goods move from origin to destination is more of the network problem versus Orion. And that's a different, by the way, a different type of infrastructure needed, much different.
Next question. Thank you, from Isidore Sosa. Thank you for the great insight, Jack. I have 3 questions. 1, what do you think is the next step for Orion? 2, how is Orion going to set new standards in supply chain? And number 3, what is your view on industrial engineering as an interdisciplinary field, say industrial engineering plus psychology or sociology?
All right, I thank you. I like this question. This is great. So let's start with UPS has a large industrial engineering department, and I was in that department starting in 1980, I think, something like that. So I loved industrial engineering. I know it's gone through some name changes in time to kind of make more sense, but it's always been seen as impact engineering. What's the right use of people, materials, balancing cost and service always. And it's an integral part of UPS, and I love that discipline of making sure that you can properly plan, execute, pull everything together. Industrial engineers are those that do management by walking around. So I'm a fan of that discipline, and I guess maybe because I've been there in that field for so long. Talking about Orion, it's always hard to explain this, so I'll try. Orion was an imperfect tool. And the problem was it optimized just before the driver left the building and never optimized again. So that order that you saw is the original order based on what we knew when the driver left. And that's where all the gains came from. It was static, as we called it. And if something happened where a driver couldn't follow Orion, they were kind of stuck trying to now figure out, what do I do? So prior to Orion, there was just a general sequence that the driver would follow, and they figured out how to deviate from that sequence to meet customer needs. Then Orion improved that and put it in a very specific order. But the next step is to optimize throughout the day. And in the conversations with some of my colleagues, that was being worked on as I was leaving, and it's being deployed now. And it's a hard thing to do, by the way, but imagine this. Here's what is happening now in this version they're putting off. A driver meets a customer, makes a delivery. So now we know what time it is. The driver will say, here's where I'm going next. Hopefully that's the next stop in the sequence. But if a driver sees something they need to do differently, the driver indicates, here's where I'm going next. While the driver is driving to that next stop, Orion in the cloud is thinking through what should the driver do after that next stop. And it could be the driver has a customer need that came in. It could be that it's later than we thought. It could be it's earlier than we thought. It could be anything. It could be a new service where a customer can make an appointment. So while the driver's driving, Orion is thinking, how should I change the route? If Orion determines that the route change is needed, it will send down to that handheld, here's the new sequence. By the way, if it doesn't change what the driver sees on their screen, if it's beyond the next 8 stops, the driver doesn't even know that it was changed. So what this does is it frees the driver from worrying as they're driving. Am I going to get here on time? What do I do if there's a problem? What do I do if there's traffic? Orion will be thinking of that all day long and making those decisions for the driver. And that's one of the major changes that are coming. And then that is linked, by the way, with the navigation that's already put off. So you can say, here's the next stop, here's where you go. So that one's short term. The next step is dispatching. So Orion decides a sequence to deliver after the work is already put on the vehicle and you know what you're going to deliver. So Orion will move upstream of that and look for work that needs to be moved between drivers and automate that dispatching of work. So that's something that's being tested now, I know. And then, optimizing any changes between drivers throughout the day. If a customer calls and says, I need to meet a driver, Orion calculates what's the best driver to serve that need, not based on where the driver is, but where they're going to be when the driver serves. And these are all part of an Orion roadmap. I used to present a Orion roadmap with 15 or 16 different steps. And we're following that. They follow that pretty closely.
I don't know if you addressed the third question, which was on what's your view on industrial engineering as an interdisciplinary field, say industrial engineering.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a fan of industrial engineering, but again, as I said, with my psychology background, I wasn't an industrial engineer in education. I was a psychology major, but I loved industrial engineering. And I think that they fit together. Like I said, I really do think it's math and psychology. You know, usability, making things work, communicating is always important. And I do think it's interdisciplinary. I do.
Okay. So we have addressed all the questions that were posted. Beth, perhaps you can open the mics, I guess, for the audience if somebody has any direct questions they want to speak up and ask. Yeah, I think everybody can.
Yes, I'm going through and giving everyone the capability to speak.
Okay. So do they have that capability, or do you have to do that one by one?
I have to do it one by one, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing it right now.
Okay, I think there was, let's see. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're just waiting for it. Anything else you want to talk about a little bit, Jack, while we wait for, in case anybody has any other questions?
Rajesh, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can.
Hey, Jack, great talk. Thank you so much for sharing that. I remember you giving a talk years ago and you mentioned that as you made the device smaller for the drivers, there was a complaint that they couldn't use it to fend off dogs. I always thought that was an interesting discussion about, you know, what are the values you're trying to deliver with the system. So any thoughts about that? You know, any values and objectives that you uncovered along the way that were surprises or interesting stories?
Well, like that was one of them. Drivers did not like the smaller device because they needed to fend off dogs. That one always stood out. Interestingly enough, with the smaller device, it was interesting how things would split. The older drivers said the device is too small. The younger drivers said the device is too big. And then you had the same issue again when you started looking at, can I do things with a cell phone and no keys? And again, you had the older drivers wanted keys and younger drivers didn't want keys. So, you know, the divide from my perspective was over time, the divide between the older generation and the younger generation started splitting. And it was very hard to figure out how to handle all of those groups. But there's probably, you know, a ton of stories of, you know, challenges to overcome when you're dealing with, you know, 55,000 people and trying to keep them all aligned. I'll tell you a story if you don't mind. This is one. And to this day, this is still true. But there was a driver who would tell us, Orion doesn't work. It will never work. And, you know, went and worked with him, looked at the routes, gave him a solution. And I forget, I think he was driving 150 miles and we said he could drive 140. And he came in that evening and he said, I told you it doesn't work. I drove 135 miles today. So, all right, we go and figure out what he did. And we say, okay, now we think you can drive 130 miles. The next day he would come in and go, see, I told you it doesn't work. I drove 120 miles. So overall, this person went from 150 miles to 115 miles, but has no belief that Orion had anything to do with it. It was him, which is fine by me. I've come to understand that the algorithm by itself or the driver by him or herself is not as good as the two working together. And it's just fine with me that the driver says, it doesn't work and I did it all myself. That's perfectly fine. So, you know, the human is inside of there.
Anyone else?
Can I ask a quick question of Jack?
Yes, please.
Hi, Warren.
Hello there. Thank you. I joined late, so I missed much, but I'm going to be listening to the recording. But your last comment I found particularly interesting, and I'm just curious on your experience on this. Like you, I have been, I'll say, with our modeling, and we do most in pricing, I have often found that some people want systems that are fully automated. They don't want people to be involved in all. And they're far more happy with when there is a person, so to speak, interacting with the system, adding their own knowledge and potentially making things smart. But not everyone really believes that the human can add that. Just curious to see over your career, have you come across those kinds of two different philosophies extensively? And just, you know, what's been your experience with what wins out and, you know, just how common that is?
So I'll tell you a story, another real story in this journey. And by the way, my belief has always been that data is not going to be perfect enough to take the human out of the loop. And that was my belief. I had a boss who was a really hard-nosed guy, loved him. I love this man, love him. But he's very hard-nosed. And early on, we would do Orion road shows, and we'd show the C-suite how Orion was working, and they'd come out. And we were in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and it was a very successful demonstration with, I think the CIO was there or something. On the way back to the hotel, my boss says to me, well, I can see a day, you know, not too distant, when drivers will have to do exactly what Orion says. It'll be 100%. And I'm like, Chuck, I don't think so. I think I'm not trying to get 100%. I'm trying to get close enough, let drivers interact. And you got to, now he's getting mad at me. He's getting animated and he's yelling and, you know, why not? And he just didn't like that I challenged him, I guess. I don't know. Or that maybe my vision wasn't smart enough. At that moment, with him telling me that my foresight wasn't forward thinking enough, in front of me, a car pulls out and smashes into another car and blocks the entire road. So I said, Chuck, Orion says my next stop's ahead. What do you want me to do? You want me to sit here? How do you want me to do it? Do you want me to turn around and make my own decision? How are we ever going to know this? And he's like, okay, I got it. There's always going to be something. And from that day, we let drivers interact. Now, by the way, one thing we did do is we went back and analyzed that decision. So we knew whether that decision a driver made was right or wrong. We could have that conversation. And then we measured it, Warren. I used to think that if we get drivers to follow it 80%, that was good. We got up to 87, and I think lately it's up to 93%. So 93% of the time, the driver does what Orion says, and that's good enough.
Hello, Jack.
Go ahead. Sorry, last question, please go ahead.
Hello, Jack. It's Graham here from the UK. Just to say hello. It's great to see you.
Hey, Graham. It's great to hear from you.
Hear your wonderful story yet again. It's been an inspiration over the last however many years since you started talking about this. So anyway, great to see you again.
Same here. Thank you, Graham. All the people I'm fans of are here.
Okay. All right. Jack, we are running out of time. We need to close this one down, but I really want to thank you for this excellent presentation. Very inspirational. I think everybody enjoyed it tremendously. And for the audience, again, if you have any other questions later on you think of, perhaps you can email them to me and I'll forward them to Jack. And if you have any suggestions about any other speakers or other people you would like to have make presentations, again, send some suggestions to me. I would appreciate that. Aside from that, again, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, Jack, and all the audience for attending this session. Totally wonderful experience. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.